So this is where you really need to do your due diligence. And as exciting as it may seem to sign a new deal, maybe it's not the best possible deal. And instead of wasting resources on a deal that has a couple of red flags that went unaddressed, you can continue to use these resources to find clients that really are excited to work with you and don't have any red flags or not just full of green flags.
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, it's Sam Keenley, and welcome back to Becoming a Hiring Machine. This is the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make the change. Today, we have an amazing Tactical Tuesday ahead of us, but before we get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about the show. Essentially, we have shows within the show. Sometimes we have interviews with industry thought leaders and others who are shaking up the space, and they're going to teach you how to do something that they do that's helped them be successful. Some days we'll cover trending topics, items that recruiters are talking about or will be very soon, and what those mean for them. Every Tuesday like today, come on by for a Tactical Tuesday episode where we go deep on how to do something that's going to help you drive better results in your day-to-day that you can start actioning on immediately. Sometimes we open it up for Q&A. Listeners can drop in questions that they'd like to hear us take on. Send those over to us at podcast@loxo.co. And every now and then you'll hear Matt come by, and he has a mic drop episode with us where he shares something that has been he's been thinking about within the recruitment space and things you need to know about. For today's Tactical Tuesday, we have Vivien Maron joining us yet again as our resident expert living at the intersection of all things recruitment and ChatGPT. And we're going to pick up where we left off on our conversation last week around the topic of getting creative with your business development strategies and tactics. We ended the conversation last week with how to plan out your 3-month outreach sequence. And today we're going to get into conducting a needs assessment. And what this is going to do is help us on two fronts. The first is clearly understanding what the potential client is looking for help with, and two, ensuring that they're going to be a good client for you to work with. It's two-way street. So on that note, let's jump into it with Vivien.
All right. So last time we talked about getting started with the business development plan, as well as the original outreach, focusing on how you can solve the potential client's problems, especially hiring and staffing needs. So today we're going to pick up right where we left off. We're going to operate on the assumption that your outreach campaign worked, and now the client actually wants to get to know you a little bit better and figure out, okay, how would this work? Would this be a good working relationship? How can you actually help each other out? So this is where we're moving on to step 4, the needs assessment and the proposal. So in this case, we're going to scroll down quite a bit in the conversation with ChatGPT. And this is where it's actually going to create a call template. So we asked it, all right, for step 4, please create a template for the sectors that we talked about. So here we're talking about healthcare, technology, and logistics. And this is essentially a call template to see what needs they have, what questions should I be asking, just to kind of have like an agenda to follow to make sure that we cover all the bases. So for the healthcare sector example, in this case, it starts off with an introduction, a warm greeting, a thank you for their time, as well as let's talk about a recent success story in healthcare staffing, just to kind of demonstrate, okay, we do have some experience in this. We have created value for others. We are solving common problems for this particular industry with these roles. And this is where you then essentially transition to understanding the client's needs and saying, okay, our success story most recently was, let's say, we helped identify a couple of travel nurses that were really needed in a particular hospital that had an upsurge of flu cases or something like that. And now we would like to know, what is your current staffing situation? What are some of the most challenging roles you are struggling to fill? And how can we potentially assist you with that? So this is obviously where the client will dive a little bit deeper into what their issues are, what have been their hiring hangups and things like that. And this is where you can say, you know what, one of our clients had a very similar issue. They had an issue with, let's say, internally, they weren't able to put out an offer fairly quickly. So how can we do this a little bit better? So you can say, maybe in this case, you talked up front about what offers were really realistic, what offers they can actually give and present within making that decision within, let's say, 2 business days of the final interview, just to make sure that those candidates do not get snatched up. So ideally, you want to do this ahead of time so that by the time all of these decisions need to be made, they don't have to go back and talk to the CFO, get budgets approved and all that kind of stuff. You want the offer to be ready to go, and all that they need to do is just put in the amount that was finalized upon negotiation. So that way you can move very quickly. You don't want to miss out and lose a placement just because the client was taking too slow. Your front end process, this is where you have full control over everything. But then where the hangups happen is the client is not providing feedback in a timely manner. They're not providing the offer as quickly as possible. They have 15 interview rounds with random people that really have nothing to do with this particular decision or even role or team or project. And you want to kind of figure out what is going on. What is their process? Why have they been struggling to fill this position, right? Because ultimately there's a reason why they're specifically coming to you. Is it a hard to fill role? In this case, we have to manage expectations of, okay, what's actually a realistic timeline on this? If this is a hard to fill role, they've been trying to fill this for 9 months. We can't just do this in a matter of 3 weeks. Like, we got to manage a little bit more of the expectations while also saying, this is how we can help you. This is what it realistically will really look like. Then it dives a little bit more into explaining how you can ensure candidate reliability and cultural fit. This is where some of our previous episodes will come in really handy, such as the interview prep and just making sure that everything is solid, writing really good presentations that really specifically highlight, I know this is what you pinpointed as your issues and your pain points. This is the direct experience this candidate has with solving that, and making sure you coach and train the candidate to really be able to really express that really well during the interview. And that way, the candidates that you sent, they interview well and they end up being no-brainers and they want to hire them. And this is where you can transition into the closing and the next steps, which would be, all right, what is an offer going to look like? In this case, we ended up having ChatGPT create a brand new agency, which is, well, in this case, it is suggesting an open trial period, which would be the equivalent of a contingency agreement. If this is a tough to fill position, you may want to put some money down to make sure that they're really interested and engaged. And this is where you can then say, we want to engage search with $5,000 down, or a retainer spread out over 3 payments. And this is where you can then essentially say it would be paid upon first submittal, upon signing agreement, upon placement, whichever way it may be. So those are really crucial questions to ask.
So one thing I do like in there at the beginning, actually 2 things. One, in that first kind of developing rapport, the first section, the warm greeting, it doesn't mention talk about the weather for 5 minutes, because, you know, if it was a human, they'd absolutely be defaulting that. ChatGPT's like, no, we're going to get that out of the way. Second thing is the time management aspect of it. So it does give you a little bit of structure for the conversation. It helps keep you on track and gives you a good sense of how much time should we be spending in different areas, just to avoid any long-windedness like I'm myself doing right now.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You gave me a little bit of time to find where the remainder of the conversation with ChatGPT was. And this is something that you guys will see. So in the notes, we're actually going to include the link directly to this conversation so that you can see this is not a smooth sailing conversation where I say one thing and ChatGPT spits out the perfect answer that needs no editing and is just ready to copy and paste. The beauty about ChatGPT is that it learns, it works with you, but it's not a mind reader. So you kind of have to give it some feedback. And this is where it gets really, really good, because the more feedback you give it and say, you know what, I'm not really good with networking events. Like, I'm super shy. I can't do this. Then you can tell ChatGPT that networking is not going to be an option for business development purposes. And when you have this little bit of a back and forth, this is where it will create that like custom, tailor-made, perfect fit of a business development strategy to really focus on your strengths. And this is the perfect segue to talk about properly vetting your client, because you already know you're a great recruiter, or you know that you have a great team of recruiters, and you want to make sure that you're not wasting their time, that you have a really good client. And so this is where I'm actually going to follow up with ChatGPT and say, listen, I want to have a template where I can vet the client, because in the past I've had clients who initially seemed very interested and excited about the process, but once candidate were submitted, it took days or maybe even weeks to get any kind of feedback. Other times clients interview the candidate and then I get no feedback. I don't know what to do. And this is really crucial, because this really affects your brand as a recruiting agency and as a recruiter, because candidates, one of the biggest pet peeves that I see candidates complain about on LinkedIn all the time is lack of feedback from recruiters. I can tell you right now from personal experience, when a recruiter has feedback from a client, we will let candidates know. However, oftentimes we just don't get that feedback. And this is where we don't have an update for you. We don't know what is going on. And this is not a good look for as a recruiter, right? So if you have clients that you have properly vetted, that are really engaged and ready to provide feedback within 24 hours of the interview to really tell you, okay, we're moving forward, or no, because XYZ, and you can actually do something in a very quick amount of time, right after a major thing happens, like you submitted candidates or a candidate has been interviewed. This is really good for you because you can provide that feedback, and it makes you look good as a recruiter, because that way, anytime that somebody comes to you and wants to work with you, it ends up being really great because now you have a really good reputation with them. The candidate will then remember you. So anytime you reach out about another role, they've had a positive experience with you as a recruiter, maybe not necessarily with the hiring manager, wasn't the right fit, which is totally fine, but they will be open to talking to you again when you have a similar role that they might be interested in. Or down the line, they end up becoming a hiring manager that needs a recruiter. They're going to come back to you because they had a really good experience with you. Or if they know someone who's looking for a recruiter because they're a great candidate or they're a hiring manager, you will be at the top of their mind. And this is where really vetting clients is super, super important. And right here, it gives us a really great outline for vetting. So one of the things it talks about is timeline expectations, which we touched on briefly before. And it's, by when do you hope to have this position filled? Is there a specific event or date driving this particular need? What's your feedback turnaround? How long do you need to provide feedback on a candidate's profile? How soon after a candidate's interview can I expect to hear back from you guys on how you want to move forward? What's your decision-making process? Who's all involved in this? What are some of your previous experiences working with an agency? Were there any challenges that you've run into that kind of turned you sour to working with agency recruiters or something like that? What's your commitment level on this? What's your communication preference? Do you want a text? Do you want a phone call? How do you want these candidates to be submitted? Are there any potential placements or potential changes that we can expect throughout the process? Do you anticipate any organizational changes, restructuring, budgetary constraints? What could kind of come out of left field potentially to impact the hiring process, as well as what's your post-placement support once a candidate is placed? Do you have an onboarding process, or do they just show up and are expected to read minds and figure out what's going on? And this is also where ChatGPT gives a really great answer on what to look out for. If you get any vague answers of like, we're just going to figure it out as we go, we're just going to see how this goes, or they're specifically very focused on how much this is going to cost us, or they've had a really bad previous agency experience. It's kind of like you go on a first date and somebody keeps talking about that bad experience with an ex. Probably not a good situation to move forward. And then also, who are the decision makers? And they're like, well, I think it's me. I think HR needs to weigh in. Maybe the CFO needs to sign off on this. I don't know. And so this is where ChatGPT kind of gives some suggestions on what to listen out for. And this is where you also need to have the strength and courage to walk away if any of these red flags pop up and there's no resolution to them. Because as exciting as it may seem to land a deal and get a signed client right now, is it actually going to land in a beneficial mutual relationship where you guys can help each other out and work together? Or is this going to be a pain in the butt that is going to put strain on the recruiters because they're working on open recs that are not going anywhere? So this is where you really need to do your due diligence. And as exciting as it may seem to sign a new deal, maybe it's not the best possible deal. And instead of wasting resources on a deal that has a couple of red flags that went unaddressed, you can continue to use these resources to find clients that really are excited to work with you and don't have any red flags and are just full of green flags.
I love it. This takes it from, what I'll say is that gut feeling where you're like, I think this will be a good client, I think this will be a bad client, I don't know, to giving you very specific, concrete ways to get to that. I mean, that list of questions was phenomenal. And even the what to look out for with that, the ambiguity, the overly ambitious timeframes, the price sensitivity, that's a real one. So these are ways where you really can, by setting yourself up for success, doing this research first, you're going to know rather quickly, are they going to be a good client? Are they going to be, how do I put this? A not great balance of time resourcing relative to the result or the output that you'll get back from it. So yeah, this is incredible. I'm glad that you could take us through that.
Yeah. And if you want to make your life a little bit more easier, you can take it a step further with ChatGPT and ask it to kind of create a new agenda where it includes that little vetting process. And what we did is it starts off again with introduction. Then it's suggested to vet the client's commitment. That's a little bit too soon because you first want to see, okay, what are the issues that they're having? Because this is where you might be able to actually identify some of the more concerning points. So I ended up giving ChatGPT feedback to say, you know what, I would like to understand the client's needs before I actually go into vetting them. And this is where it rearranged the meeting agenda and gave me a good idea of like what's going on and how to structure the conversation. And as always, you don't have to be super strict with it and the flow of it. In some cases, some of these questions that ChatGPT is suggesting, they will organically be answered in another question or another part of this conversation and outline. But this also is really good because it gives you something that you can send to the client and say, you know what, this is what we're going to talk about. I want to understand your needs. Those are some of the questions that I'm going to ask you. If they prepare and have answers to the specific questions that you included in the meeting agenda, that way you know that's a green flag already. But if you've given them plenty of heads up and you gave them a couple of questions that would be really helpful to come in with, and they just haven't even done their due diligence, that's the first sign. Same thing like we talked about with candidates preparing and reviewing the interview prep email that you send and the resources. When you're on the phone with them, prepping them for the actual interview, did they come prepared? Did they do their homework? This shows you the level of excitement and commitment that they have as well. So this is a great kind of sneaky way almost to vet potential clients.
Yeah, it'll work. And especially, I mean, I know right now things are tough out there for some recruiters, but things will get better. And as you know, the economy turns around, jobs but open to back up. If you work in a specific niche or anything, this will be really handy when you do start to find that your book of business is filling up to your capacity. You can start to pick and choose who will be those perfect clients that you want to work with long term, are always going to be great to work with, enjoyable. So this is phenomenal. I love also just the framework that it gives you in the context. Like you said, you know, ChatGPT isn't always going to give you the perfect answer, and that's okay. That's why we say AI is not going to take over the world. AI is not going to replace your job. ChatGPT, if you're listening, don't hurt me in 50 years when this does change. But it's giving you the framework, the models where you then go apply your knowledge, your common sense, anything else to say, you know, I want to tweak this, I want to move that. But it gives you the starting blocks, so to speak, for you to build off of. So that's what really helps just be more efficient in a way with your time and giving you great ideas. So as we say, you know, don't look for this to be replacing what you do, but it's a superpower when you can use it correctly.
Yeah, exactly.
Love it. Well, Vivien, thank you as always. This has been incredibly knowledgeable, helpful as usual. So hope it really inspires some recruiters. This is part 2. We'll continue to carry on this series next week and get a little bit further in this. So everyone, that is the show. That's another Tactical Tuesday with Vivien. Until next time.
Bye, everyone.